Hello, kindergartners. It is our second week of learning about David Shannon for our author study. Last week we read some of our David stories in the classroom and via YouTube. This week we're going to read a different story that he wrote. It is called Jangles, a big fish story. I had never read this one before, but it's a pretty good story. Let's think about what we might make some connections to during the story. Jangles, a big fish story by David Shannon. When the sun goes down and the weather's just right, Big Lake gets smooth as glass and a thin mist whispers across it. That's when you might catch a glimpse of Jangles. My father told me lots of stories, but my favorite was about a giant trout he saw when he was a kid. I still remember sitting with him in front of the big stone fireplace at the cabin. He pulled out a dirty green tackle box and shook it a couple times so it rattled. Then he told me this story. When I was a kid, Jangles was the biggest fish anyone had ever seen or heard. That's right, you could hear Jangles. He'd broken so many fishing lines that his huge, crooked jaw was covered with old, rusty metal lures and fish hooks of all shapes and sizes. They clinked and clattered when he swam, and that's why he was called Jangles. Jangles was so big, he ate eagles from the trees that hung over the lake and full-grown beavers that strayed too far from home. I think I see Jangles went right through the air, and that's his little tail going off. But he didn't seem to care for the taste of kids. In fact, people swear one time Jangles saved a baby who fell into the lake when his family's canoe tipped over. They say he took that baby up so gently that none of the hooks even stuck it, and he swam it to shore. Supposedly, he gave the baby's mama a dirty look as if to say, "What are you doing bringing your precious little baby out here on a tippy old canoe?" Everyone wanted to catch Jangles. They held big tournaments with lots of prize money, but no one could bring him in. He was too smart and too strong, and he lived too deep down in the middle of the lake. They tried all sorts of tricks, like using a whole turkey as bait. I see that right here. Somebody put a whole turkey on the line. One fellow even tried to use dynamite. He threw big cans of tuna fish in the water and waited until he heard Jangles coming. Then he lit a stick of dynamite and tossed it in the lake. I don't know if it hit a rock or something, but that dynamite came flying back out of the water and back onto his boat and blew it to smithereens. Then he had to swim all the way back to the dock. He said Jangles came up and bumped him on his butt, but nobody believed him. One time, when I was just about your age, I was fishing over where the creek comes to the lake, and my anchor came loose. I was concentrating so hard on catching a fish that I didn't notice I was drifting way out to the middle of the lake. There wasn't another soul there, and it was getting dark. Just when I realized where I was, I felt a tug on my line. Not a real big tug, but just something that was on the other end. I started to reel it in. It was wiggling all right, but it didn't really feel like a fish. I finally got it in, and what do you know? I'd snagged an old fishing rod that somebody must have dropped out a long time ago. I started to reel that one in too. I cranked and finally felt the end getting closer to the surface. Then I heard a sound that made my whole body feel all prickly. It was kind of soft at first. Tinkle, tinkle, tingle. But then it started to get louder. Tingle, jingle, jangle. Now, I used to daydream all the time about catching Jangles. But right then, I was scared to death. Just when I saw the lure on the end of the line, a gigantic shadow came out of the deep darkness and swallowed it up. Uh-oh. I think Mr. Jangles is coming. My rod bent nearly in half. I was hanging onto it like it was my first dollar when Jangles suddenly swam under the boat and pulled me right over the side and into the cold, black lake. Down we went like a crazy horse and buggy. Pretty soon I noticed I could still breathe, and the water wasn't cold anymore. I wonder what happened. Finally, we came to a cave in the deepest part of the lake. It was decorated with parts of old boats and lots of rods and reels. "This is my home," said Jangles. "It's been a long time since I had a visitor." His voice was so low and soothing, it seemed perfectly natural that a fish was talking, so I wasn't afraid at all. Jangle doesn't look quite as big as he looked before. Then Jangles told me stories, amazing, wonderful stories about the beginning of the earth before they were people, and stories about wise old redwood trees and animals who were silly and the great fish that lived before him in Big Lake. It was like Jangles was my magic uncle. After a while, I started to get sleepy, and he said, "Time to go." He told me to hang on to the big fin on his back. I still had the old rod in my hand, and as we swam up to the water, it turned from black to purple, and slowly I pulled out some line and made a bunch of long loops. When we reached the surface, Jangles swam alongside my boat. Quick as a minnow, I hopped off the fish's giant back and threw the coils of line around him. With a sharp yank, I spun him upside down. Now you might not know this, but when you turn a fish upside down, even a big, old, smart fish like Jangles, it gets confused and can hardly move, like it's paralyzed. That doesn't seem very kind. "Gotcha!" I shouted. Jangles just lay there, but he could still talk. "You tricked me," he cried. "I told you the secrets from the beginning of time, and this is how you thank me?" "You're a fish," I said, "and I have caught you." "Set me free," Jangles urged. "I am more than a fish. I am a storyteller, and a story." "A story when no one will believe if I let you go," I replied. Then Jangles asked me, "Is that more important than doing the right thing?" What do you think, kindergartners? Is having people believe his story better than just letting the fish go? I think it'd be more kind to let the fish go. Let's see what he ends up doing. I thought of all the wondrous things I'd heard that day. Then I thought about people dragging whole turkeys around the lake. "You're right," I said. "I'm sorry. I will set you free. But what can I do to apologize?" I swear Jangles grinned at me with a big, crooked, jingly jaw of his. "There's one thing you can do to help me," he said, "and it would also prove you caught old Jangles." Wonder what it could be. That's when my dad stopped telling his story and gave me his tackle box. It was full to the top with shiny metal lures and rusty old fish hooks of all shapes and sizes. He never told anyone about catching Jangles the big fish. He kept it a secret until that night when he told me. I wonder why these fishing lures are a way to tell that he caught Jangles. Thinking back, I think I recognize some of these lures as some of the ones that might have been in Jangles' mouth before. So I think that's what he did to make it up to Jangles. I think he ended up taking out all the fishing lures from Jangles' jingly mouth. That is a great story. It's a good way to think about how we can be better friends. Sometimes the story is not worth it in the end, and you just have to be kind and think about what's most helpful. That was a really good story. I'm glad I could share it with you, kindergartners. Have a good week. Bye.